Title: A Light in the Dust. In a quiet village tucked between sun-scorched hills and winding dirt paths, lived a young woman named Amara. Her home was built from cracked clay and tin, barely tall enough for her to stand in, and the roof often leaked when the rains remembered the earth. She rose with the sun each morning, feet bare, dress faded from too many washes and too few replacements. Despite the poverty that clung to her surroundings like the ever-present dust, Amara carried herself with a quiet fire in her eyes. She would help her mother fetch water from the well 2 miles away, then teach the village children to read using old, torn books donated years ago by travelers. Her dreams were too big for the village, but she never saw it that way. Instead, she dreamed of making the village big enough for her dreams. In the evenings, she'd sit by the one flickering lantern, writing letters to no one in particular, just to keep the words alive in her. One day, she'd whisper to the stars, this story will reach farther than these hills. Amara's days were slow, stitched together with silence and the rhythm of chores. But her mind raced far beyond her village. Past the brittle fields, past the rusted school bell that hadn't rung in years, past the mountains that rose like the backs of sleeping beasts. She often sat beneath the old fig tree outside the village, her journal balanced on her knees, writing stories about cities she'd never seen and skies full of lights that never dimmed. In her stories, she was a doctor or an artist, or someone who walked into rooms and made people stop and listen. She wrote about love, not the kind found in whispered gossip behind cooking fires, but the love of purpose, of knowing you mattered. Her father had died when she was 10, a quiet man who worked the fields until the cough took him. Her mother carried grief like a shawl, always draped around her shoulders but never spoken of. Amara inherited her strength and her silence. There was one small radio in the village, owned by the old tailor. Every Sunday, he'd set it on a wooden stool and let the children gather. The static voice spoke of elections, cities, floods, and victories, things that felt unreal to most. But to Amara, those moments of sound were like sparks to dry grass. She wanted to leave, not out of bitterness, but out of a promise she made to herself. She would return one day, but not empty-handed. She would bring knowledge, medicine, perhaps even electricity. The world doesn't owe me a way out, she once wrote, but I owe it a way in. Art 3. The Letter That Changed the Wind. One humid afternoon, Amara found a letter pinned to the school's broken door, a flyer really. Faded blue ink on crumpled paper, fluttering in the dusty breeze. Regional Youth Essay Contest. My dream for my country. Winner receives scholarship to city school. Deadline 2 weeks. Her heart skipped. She clutched the paper like treasure, eyes wide. No one else paid much attention. The idea of someone from their village winning something like that felt unreal. But that night, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by the oil lamp with her journal open and started writing, pouring her heart into the page. She wrote about her village, about cracked water pots and worn sandals, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, of returning to light a path for others. Her words weren't polished, but they were true, soaked in dust and hope. She sent it through the postman who only came twice a month, sealed in an envelope borrowed from the tailor's drawer. Then she waited. Weeks passed. Life moved on. The well still needed hauling, the sky still stayed stubbornly dry. She never even told her mother. But then, on the first rainy morning in months, the postman returned. This time, he brought more than silence. He brought a letter with Amara's name on it. In neat, typed letters it read, "Congratulations. You've been selected." The quiet strength. Before the illness came, Amara remembered her father as a man of few words and strong hands. His name was Kofi. He was a farmer, like most men in the village, rising before the sun and returning home with his shirt soaked in sweat and his heart full of pride. He didn't have much, but what he had, he gave. He built their home with his own hands, every wall, every beam. When Amara was a child, she'd sit on the edge of the field, watching him bend and sow, the rhythm of his work hypnotic. He'd call her my little flame, saying she had fire in her eyes and a future he wouldn't live to see but already believed in. At night, he'd sit her on his lap and teach her simple things, how to count in twos, how to recognize bird calls, how to listen more than she spoke. The world, he once whispered, listens to those who listen first. When he fell ill, Amara was only 10. It started with a cough, then the long silences. She remembered his eyes more than his words in those final days, soft, proud, and full of unspoken dreams. His passing carved a hollow space in their home, but it lit a new fire in Amara. She would carry his name, not just in memory but in action, before the last rain. The sky was heavy that afternoon, clouds swollen like they carried secrets. Amara sat beside her father under the mango tree behind their home, her bare feet dangling, toes curling in the soft dust. Kofi leaned against the trunk, a scarf wrapped around his neck to fight the cough. His breath was shallow, but his eyes still held that quiet fire, the same one Amara would one day carry. "Papa," she asked softly, "have you ever been beyond the hills?" He smiled, slow and dry. "Only in my head." She rested her chin on her knees. "What's out there?" He paused, looking at the horizon like it held the answer. Cities that never sleep. Roads that stretch longer than stories. People who speak 100 tongues. But also, people who forget where they came from. "Would you want me to go?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a worn, leather-bound book. Its edges were curled, its pages marked with tiny notes in pencil. "I started this for you," he said. "It's not full, but it's yours now. Fill it with the world. Write it all down so you never forget where your roots are." Amara took the book in trembling hands. She held it close, not knowing then how much it would mean to her. That was the last real conversation they had. When the rain came that night, it came gently, as if the sky knew it was time to say goodbye. The morning she was to leave, the village was wrapped in mist, like the world was holding its breath. Amara stood in front of her home, a single woven bag slung over her shoulder. Inside it, 2 dresses, the leather-bound book from her father, a pen, and the scholarship letter. That was all she carried, but it felt like the weight of 2 lives, the one she was leaving and the one she hadn't yet stepped into. Her mother didn't say much, just held her close, tight enough to press years of unspoken love into her skin. Then she slipped a thin bracelet onto Amara's wrist. "From your grandmother," she said, voice thick. She wore it the day she left her own home. "Now you wear it." The children she had taught came to the edge of the path to wave. One of them, little Syrah, held up a crooked drawing. Amara standing tall in front of a chalkboard, stars above her head. She couldn't speak, just smiled and blinked the tears away. The bus came late, it always did, sputtering up the new road they had recently laid with community effort. Amara climbed in without looking back. She knew if she turned around, she might not leave. As the engine roared to life and the village faded behind the dust, Amara opened her father's book. On the inside cover was a note she hadn't noticed before. "Your story is your compass. Trust it. Kofi." She looked out the window, eyes on the horizon. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something far away. It felt like it had already begun. A different sky. The city hit Amara like wind after drought. The bus rolled into a crowded terminal filled with honking horns, shouting vendors, flashing lights, and a sea of unfamiliar faces. The air smelled of metal, spice, and dust, a completely different kind of dust from home. Faster. Restless. Amara stepped off the bus, gripping her bag tighter. Her sandals felt too thin for the concrete beneath her feet, and her dress, once her nicest, suddenly seemed out of place among the crisp shirts and bright fabrics around her. She had the name of a hostel written on a folded piece of paper, a place recommended by the scholarship program. She asked 3 people before someone pointed her in the right direction. The streets buzzed with movement. Cars zipped past like thoughts you couldn't catch. Everyone looked like they knew where they were going. Amara walked slowly, heart hammering in her chest, the leather-bound book tucked close to her side like a shield. When she finally reached the hostel, a tall, faded building tucked between 2 louder ones, she was exhausted. The receptionist barely looked up. "Room 14. Shared. Curfew's 10. That night, in a narrow bunk bed, listening to the sounds of strangers breathing in the dark, Amara opened her father's book again. She didn't write anything yet, just traced the edges of the pages, like grounding herself to something that still felt like home. She whispered, "I made it, Papa."